Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Future Talks. I'm your host, Superintendent Michael Matsuda, Superintendent of the Anaheim Union High School District. And as our 8,000 podcast listeners know, this show is all dedicated to the future of education, especially in this volatile, upside-down world. How do we navigate forward? And today we're very lucky to have an expert on navigation through the HR lens, Lyle Kirtman. Lyle, welcome to our show.
Oh, thank you for inviting me. I'm excited.
A little bit of background on you. He's written 6 books, and I think some of our local audience, the AUHSD, is reading or have read your one of your latest books, 4 Steps. Is that the
Shaping the Future for Pivots?
Shaping the Future for Leadership Pivots. We're going to talk about that. Was published by Corwin. And I think that book kind of brought us together initially. But I always start, Lyle, with kind of who are you and how did you get involved in this big idea of connecting HR to innovation in schools?
Yeah, so I have a little different route that I took to be in the education world. I didn't come from the K-12 public education world, which probably gives me the chance to be a little different. I came from working in the business world, running and operating my family real estate business. So I had to do that work for a number of years while I was going to school and have an education background in counseling psychology. So I had these two worlds of business and counseling psychology, and I combined them both into an effort to help organizations deal with the psychological and personal sides of change, as well as the business and organizational. And that got me into this whole world of education. People always ask me, how did you get into innovation? I didn't come from this world. So to me, I've worked with business, industry, federal government, creative arts organizations. I've been in every sector. So medical, I've worked in the medical side. So to me, innovation is broader. So I look at it as very normal to me, but it's outside of the experience of most educators. What's helped me is I've worked with 500 school districts over 30 years. So I understand education in depth and have worked in that and helped over 1,000 principals and superintendents and coached even a state superintendent around his leadership for 5 years. So I understand the education world, but I didn't come from it. So because I have a different viewpoint, it looks like I'm being innovative when I'm actually bringing in the thinking of so many other fields into education. But because I know education, I know how to interpret it and bring it in a way that makes sense.
Well, I think you straddle this real world challenge of how do we build an innovative culture within a big bureaucracy. I think this is where Clay Christensen of Harvard is in, right? And in your latest books, 4 Steps to Building Leadership Capacity, you talk about the right drivers for sustained improvement. What does that mean, the right drivers for sustained improvement? And could you talk a little bit about these 4 pivots that you brought up in this book?
Yeah, one of the things that I speak a lot about is there's too many initiatives every year in education. We got to do this year. Now it's AI has taken over the world. Before that, it was, many other issues. I wanted to say there's a way to shift your leadership without a new initiative, by thinking differently, by operating differently, not adding on more things to your plate. So I looked at what were the factors that I saw from research that I've done around leaders that really make a difference to results for students. And that's where I got these 4 pivots from, which I could go over to. Many of them you're already doing in your district, some that really could be even enhancing your work.
So this is what you call coherence with these things. And I think one of the shifts that you promote in terms of building an innovative culture is looking at people differently and looking at evaluation of teachers differently. It's not sort of this gotcha. Could we start with that in terms of how, because like so many HR are
Right.
all about accountability, using traditional metrics to quote improve teaching and learning, when in fact oftentimes it does the opposite. Could really be what does this mean to move from negative accountability to capacity building?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we've done is we put the focus on where the students need to be in this world to succeed. But we forgot the fact that the culture of the people who've come into that education world was not with that background. So we have to shift the entire mindsets and working of the workforce to think differently to be able to do the student piece. That even includes things like AI. That's why I look at the HR function. The human resource function is a very compliance-oriented activity that is going on, which actually can block the work that we need to do to change the workforce. And part of that is the workforce crisis we're in. We're panicking we can't get people, but we're not looking at why are they leaving? Why are they dissatisfied? They're dissatisfied. The best leaders leave and the other people stay. So how do we create an environment where the best people want to come and work in education? They're not enjoying it. They're not enjoying their work the way they should be. So how do we look at this differently? And a lot of the steps in bureaucracy that's here is not designed to get the best people. It's to make sure we don't have liability. You know, and I worked at the state and federal level. I always tell people the problem at the state and federal level, all the regulations are based on liability. If something goes wrong in one part of California, everybody gets a rule. That's how it works. That's how state and federal government works. That has nothing to do with the kids and the people in your district. We have to look at what the outcomes are and then back plan to how we want to get people and we want to function. That's not the way the system is devised. It's devised the opposite, about incremental compliance, accountability, and basically fear-based environment.
Fear-based environment, which unfortunately many teachers that are working in districts with the wrong drivers, right, more test-based and compliance-driven. Another big important pivot that you that you really point out is moving from sort of individual siloed strategy to a teamwork approach. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, because the problem we've had in education that I've spent all these years working with, and so have you, is that we tell the people above to tell the teachers what to do. The teachers shut the door and do whatever they want. Mostly.
Yes, yeah, that's
They
right.
all say yes, superintendent, whatever you say, and then they shut the door. The other thing I've discovered, and some of this is with Michael Fullen, who I do a lot of work with and you work with, is there's a secret society of teachers, especially, who do what is necessary for kids, but don't want to get caught and get in trouble. So they shut the door and they do really good things a lot of times for kids. But when they come out of the door, they get observed. They make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to be. I'll give you a great example. I had a teacher who was incredibly high performance, doing great work. And she was telling me how she was following all the regulations. And I said, "You're lying to me." And she, "What do you mean you're lying to me?" Because I'm pretty direct, as you've learned, Michael, right? I'm very direct. So I said, "There's no way you're that successful in doing what you're told. It's not possible." So she said, "Do you want me to tell the truth?" I said, "Yes, tell the truth." Okay, I set up an observation. When people come above to visit me, I set up 2 room structures. When they come in, I showed them one. As soon as they leave, I changed around the room to what I need to do. So she would never show the truth. And she told her colleagues to follow the rules, to not get in trouble.
Yeah.
So she was successful. And then the district made her an administrator, and she learned all the wrong ways to do it and ended up quitting education. So she was successful as a teacher, but had to hide what she was doing that was successful. And when she became administrator with all the regulations, her performance went down.
Unfortunately, Lyle, I think that is the culture of many districts, right? That everybody pretends,
right?
And then in reality, there's a whole nother thing going on. The third thing you talk about, and this is really a big one because now there's a big push on AI and technology. You're saying that should not be the end goal. It should be about pedagogy. Could you elaborate on that point, on that pivot?
Yeah, so I've been talking about this and actually demonstrating that what we're doing was, as every new initiative, we're at the top, we're trying to figure it out, tell everybody what to do. We're taking it as separate, not integrated. So we have the IT people training people about AI. We have high-performing people learn this as first adopters and think that they're going to get to the people who are skeptical. It's a good strategy to get the high-performing people, but that's not what's going to get to them. If we want to go to scale, we have to meet them where they are. So to me, I take the technology off the table with teachers. I say, let's talk about what you would do if you had the time and the resources to really make a difference for kids. I don't want to talk about technology at all. And don't tell me you don't have time. What would you do? We figure that out and say, okay, you think this is impossible. Let's add in AI as a tool to help you do that. Changes around their viewpoints completely, because I don't want to talk about cheating. I don't want to talk about regulations. I want to talk about what you're trying to do to make a difference for kids. If you had another 4 hours, what would you do? Would you go deeper with kids? How to do that? So that motivates them, and then AI becomes a tool, not a focus. Works
well. It's really a psychological construct in terms of how you're framing the change, right? And I think that's so important, because so far we've talked about moving from negative accountability to capacity building. We want collaboration and teamwork, and then focus on this pedagogy. And all of them are interrelated, because in order for you to improve, you're going to need to rely and learn from your teammates, your other teachers. So the last one you talk about is approaching this in a more systemic way to create lasting change. We must move away from this fragmented approach. So what does that mean?
Yeah, so I talk a lot about integrative thinking. And the idea of integrative thinking is, how do I take multiple ideas and keep them in my head and try to integrate them to implement, rather than what we do is everything's a separate initiative. We have to do this, then we have to do this. How do we do multiple areas? And I always say this, and you being a superintendent know that people below think when they come to you with two different problems, you pick one to solve it. That's not what you do. You integrate and look for where do they connect to the outcomes you're trying to do. So if we can learn how to be integrative thinkers, we don't have to do everything separate. We don't have to do all the mandates from the state, or if there is any from the federal government. We can integrate them together into one effort. And I've done this with controversial issues of DEI and social emotional. I never believed, and I wrote about, they should not have been separate initiatives. They should have been all integrated together into how do we understand our students and our adults, because they have all these different backgrounds and cultures. They didn't need to be separate initiatives. I always thought, and I wrote about that would actually hurt the work of all those areas, and it has. If you do it as one integrated effort, it is not hard to do, because everybody has a different background and different story. And that's what leaders do, is connect, and that's what we do with students. So we keep separating. We have to, I always say, integrate, don't separate these things. That's the key. And then we can focus. And then we don't have a million mandates and things to do.
So let's go from the macro to the micro. You're working directly with AUHSD and some of our leading teachers around some of these big issues. What have you learned from the teachers? I know I've learned a lot just being a fly on the wall with some of those convenings you've had. And I think one of your big pieces, I think especially in a highly unionized district like ours, is moving away from, because the union, no one likes this gotcha mentality, top-down sort of accountability, where we want to create more of a supportive climate and to really enhance talent. So what are some of your takeaways from the teachers that you're hearing from in our district?
Yeah, well, I can already see it in your district when I've met with them, and I know there's been follow-up. Instead of saying, how do we evaluate teachers, we have them control their own narrative, their own story. So Michael Fullen talks about, and I do too, about intrinsic accountability. We don't need external accountability. There's actually no data in research, Michael has confirmed with me, that evaluation improves performance anyway. It never has and it never does, and other sectors are moving away from traditional evaluations. What does is continuous feedback. from that person trying to get a result, that they get feedback on what they're improving on, what they need to work on. So your teachers that I've met are really intrinsically motivated to the results for students. That's the shift that I think you've made from the teachers I met. So when you give them feedback on their own style and their own behavior and what can they do differently, they feel they control that story. So they take it in. Because of our traditional system, people get defensive and they feel attacked. So we have to shift that to you control your own narrative, not to do, and people are critical of what I say too, say they get to do whatever they want. No, they don't get to do whatever. They get to do what helps students succeed. That's
yeah, it's very interesting because that's exactly what we're trying to get for students. So students take more ownership to this reflective cycle of learning, right? Feedback loops, right? How can I get better? We want that to be internalized. Going back to the moving from a traditional evaluation to the sort of this talent development collaborative we're trying to create, what might be some ways forward that we can move that based on all of your knowledge about working with districts in terms of the old school dated evaluative construct that we have?
Yeah. So one thing I started working with your HR department, and you've seen is something a little bit pushing this to a higher level. I've done 150 superintendent searches, and I know I'm not a person who believes in job descriptions. That's from the 50s. The job descriptions are old models. Job descriptions mean nothing. They say at the end, and do whatever your boss tells you. So it's a meaningless document, right? It's task oriented. So I believe there should be a leadership profile for every role. I do that with superintendents when I help hire or with principals. So I threw out this idea, and I'm working with your team on a leadership profile for teachers. Teachers are leaders in their classroom, in their school, in the district. They have expertise that shouldn't be in a box, that could be used by other people. They can combine with people in the community. So having them look at what does it mean to be a leader as a teacher? And how do I drive towards that leadership, towards results? And then how do I get feedback on that? And how do I get coaching, not accountability? I'm accountable to the students and my improvement of my craft. I should be coached by the people above, not told what to do. And if I'm not doing something that's successful, I need to be moved towards a point of doing that. I even think that I'm not a fan of writing people up and, putting them on improvement plans. 85% of improvement plans result in the person leaving. They're not improvement plans, they're firing plans. That's not how they work. So my belief is we coach people to success. We have them clear on the outcomes. And if they're not doing it, we give them a choice. Either you work this way because this is how we work on our system, or this may not be the right job for you. You don't fire them, you give them the choice.
So one of the challenges, Lyle, is that, as education is evolving in terms of the purpose of a K-12 education, you can say from test scores to whole child,
right,
student voice, all of that. We have people that were brought in that, under the NCLB world, and their mental model of schools is still tethered to that old model. So how do we support them and widening their aperture of what schools should and can be?
Yeah, and the first pivot I talk about is the North Star, which you've done, which most districts. What is the outcome you want for students? And everybody always tells me, we know. And I'll ask 50 teachers or principals. They have 50 different answers everywhere I go. So because some say it's the child development, some say it's, soft skills, or I call them more essential skills. Some say it's the academic test score. It is an integrated approach. At the state level, when I coached the state superintendent in Massachusetts, I said, the problem is you're just doing the test scores. That's not what prepares kids for success in life. And I think part of the model we have to change is we used to believe that the higher education people are going to deal with that. Well, I work with the higher education, and you have too. They're not going to do this piece. So it's really the responsibility of public education to think beyond just getting them to college or to their job, is to success in life. And this is a whole different way of thinking. The problem is all the measurements externally are only about test scores. And that's the battle. Now, I've worked on integrating these so that we can measure, like you do with your PTAs, and how we can measurables show how critical thinking skills actually does get better test scores.
Yes.
Or working in a team, that these are not separate areas. But I think we've separated them out. So you're either for them or against them as opposed to integrating. And I think states are behind them now. They're still sticking. Now, the irony is, as you know, the business community only knows this model. If you connect to the business community, they understand this because they have to have people who can work in teams and communicate and be resilient and creative, not just a score on a test. They don't even ask, back to the HR, they don't even ask those questions in interviews. So we're preparing kids for interviews, which they're never going to be asked about anything related to their test scores. It's not relevant at all. But it doesn't mean we're against the academic learning of the test scores. We need to do both. So I think it's hard because the outside pressure say, I can't do this until the state and federal government tells me I can.
So I think this tool, I know we only have a few more minutes here, but the tool that you're using that helps, it's a reflective feedback tool for leadership. That's, I think, a concrete way forward, right? With teachers that were brought in 20 years ago, and yet they're struggling with these new models that were the new North Star that we've been, that we've collectively created. Could you, the last few minutes, just make that connection between this tool that you're talking about, leadership tool, and maybe moving toward a new North Star?
Yeah, so I developed with Pearson and ASCD this workplace personality inventory. I did 2 years of research to see what are the characteristics of high-performing leaders. So we can tell through this assessment whether people think this way or not. If they don't, it doesn't mean we don't hire them. We can help them develop. And we can see, I have districts that have been doing this for multiple years, whether somebody is improving, whether they're thinking differently now, because the other problem is they're so stressed out in the current system. They're not doing well. So it's not like, leave me alone, it's working. It's not working for them. So now they can control their own development. And that's why I say to people like you as superintendent, you have to model this behavior of being a reflective leader, because they need to be. And teachers need to be, and principals need, in the business world, there's actually much more of that than in education. If you read any leadership books in the corporate world, it's always about reflection. It's always about learning and assessing. In education, we haven't done that as much. And we need to do that, because that gives you the basis of your own development. If I can start thinking differently, then I can take in these ideas, as opposed to somebody telling me what to do.
So the final question, Lyle, is where you operate both at the district teacher level, but also at that 30,000 foot level across the country. Do you think that there is a growing movement with these 4 pivots and developing coherence around a new North Star?
I think, I spent a lot of time with superintendents, for example, across the country, and I feel they're so afraid. They're so reluctant to do this. Now, when I'm able to engage with them in doing this, they turn around their attitude. But school boards, et cetera, the system needs to think differently. The state and federal people need to think differently. So I think there are individual districts that are doing it, but we don't have the larger movement on it, because they're worried so much about the trouble they're going to get into from the state and federal side, which is not true. I mean, they don't realize that the people who follow the structures and the rules actually don't succeed. The ones who work around those are the ones who succeed. 100%. I have data to prove it nationally.
Well, I think you are helping us. You're showing the way forward for us, and your work affirms the work that we've done. Yeah. And on behalf of our students, our 25,000 students and our board, we thank you for your advice and your wisdom at this critical juncture for education. Thank you, Lyle.
All right. And thank you for being one of those people who are going to help spread this to other people. I appreciate it. All right. Thank you, Michael.